Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon. Episode 3 is now here, and it's packed with Easter eggs, changes to the book, and basically a sort of day in the life of a manager when everything's gone to crap. Taking place predominantly at King's Landing, we watch Rhaenyra struggle with the weight of the crown in a kind of a bottle episode.
I'm doing a bottle episode.
Episode 3 deep dives into the politics of Westeros and how crushing the weight of the crown is. There's lots of metaphors throughout as well, and some really good carryovers from the rats in season 1. Don't want to waste any more of your time though, so let's just get straight into the episode.
Must justify my father's faith in me.
Now, we open with Aemond brokering terms with Daemon. Rather than starting with the title sequence, this drops us right in at the deep end. In case you don't know, Aemond's got the largest army in the war, and we see just how huge his host is. It numbers in the thousands, and he also has Targaryen with him, who's one of the Green's last dragons. You can see the 2 dragon handlers as well, and this sort of comes full circle at the end of the episode. In this scene, Aemond agrees to hand over Daemon, but the guy's done the old switcheroo. This is all new for the show as well, but I actually figured out the twist for it in last week's episode's trailers. We actually saw the real Daemon in episode 1, which was confirmed by the casting. I actually think in hindsight though, they could have kept him out of the episode and had this just be a twist at the end before we then meet the real one. This stand-in as well is actually way more accurate to the book, and I think that would have worked really well. But to be honest, I didn't really mind it, and even until the end, I was constantly second guessing myself. Now the reason I didn't really hand him over is because he's got other plans, and Daemon is Aemond's squire, and we have seen in stuff like Night of the Seven Kingdoms how they're kind of like family, so I didn't just think he would go in and hand him straight over. In the book, he was vital in helping Aemond's army as they marched south and essentially saved the day during the Battle of the Honeywine. He then got the nickname Daemon the Daring, though they might handle it another way in the show. A lot of the big battles involving him have happened off screen, which I think is likely due to budget constraints. I do think the showrunners got really creative though, and the fake prince storyline is a nice little twist. But unfortunately because of that, even the major fights like the Battle of Tumbleton have happened off screen, which we learn about at the end of the episode. But I will cover that when we get to that part. Overall though, I will say this is actually one of my favourite episodes in the show's history, and though I think it's simple, I think the pacing, storytelling, characterization, focus, and score are all excellent. Had we had last week's episode as the finale and the one before it as episode 9, then I think season 2 might have actually been something that people look back on fondly. But alas, HBO had ran out of coffers. They had the banks had been stripped dry, and like Rhaenyra, they couldn't afford to do it. The way this takes place in the story, though, does kind of fit with the book, as we actually start a brand new chapter after the events here wrap up. This is part 5 of the Dance of the Dragons, with the title being Rhaenyra Triumphant. It does kind of feel like a season premiere as well, with it starting things at the beginning of a new arc. Now, Daemon is here to accept Aemond's surrender, as they have King's Landing, and the guys here are greatly outnumbered. This was hinted at as an idea in the book, with Rhaenyra's advisors suggesting that some of the lords be pardoned should they bend the knee. Aemond is also at death's door as well, and Aegon is to the wind, so Daemon seems like he's the one with all the cards. The dragon seeds are with him as well, and it's so Jova for the Greens. At least that's what we're led to believe. I know we could potentially have a dragon versus dragon fight, but you've got 3 versus 1, and also Targaryen is quite a young dragon. So Aemond is playing things strategically, and he goes along with the surrender. As always, he's followed by Sir John Roxton, who's played by Joplin Sibtane, fresh off his superb role as Brasso and Andor. I love how smug Daemon here is as well, with him saying the war is won. Matt Smith has been superb the last few weeks, and it's amazing what he can do when you don't lock him up in Luigi's mansion for weeks on end. Daemon is also aloof when he says that Aemond can return to Old Town and live his life in peace. It's almost like he just wants him out of sight and completely away from everything. Now this bit has 2 meanings for me personally. The first is that he sees living one's life in peace as being a waste of time. Daemon is only happy when he's fighting or in conflict. Come this episode, he and his wife have achieved their goal and finally taken the throne. But he wants to go out and take all of Essos. He's not interested in peace, and instead just suggests it for those below him. James Norton is great as well, and equally as smug as Aemond, until he's told about the fate of his uncle, who went off and had a nice night's sleep.
Enjoy, guys. Stay alive.
I'll see you later.
As long as you can.
Look after yourself, mate.
Yeah, see you later, mate. Daemon then reminds him that if the army is to fight, they'll all be toast immediately. He even jokes that Ulf would love to be the Lord of Old Town, which is something that is a cheeky little setup for something that's coming down the line. Ulf, of course, has wanted riches since claiming his dragon, and he thought he'd be named a lord in episode 1. It's something he's fantasized about ever since he was a boy, and he even used it as a coping mechanism to deal with his abuse. In this episode, he also insults Rhaenyra. It's complete and total opposite of how the dubbing's treated in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and it starts a bit of divide between the accepted and the bastards. Ulf's been raised his whole life to think that the Targaryens are exceptional, but now he's realised that even amongst them, there's people who are more equal than others. This ambition is something that's really driving the character though, and to be honest, it's something his kin also shares. It's basically amongst a family who are like, doing whatever they can to get the Iron Throne, and then even after that, Daemon's like, nah, we need to go somewhere else, conquer that as well. So Ulf, being that ambitious as well, they're not that different. Aemond then explains that he would love to resist, but he has the lives of his men to consider. This is something Daemon just brushes off, but as we know, it's all a massive trick. On first watch, I did think it was a bit weird to have him surrendered so easily, but again, it's all a ploy for the Blacks to think the war is over and that they pose no threat. This is also they can take Tumbleton and make the Blacks think they've already won. In the words of Bane, victory has defeated you, and if people think they've beaten their opposition, they'll lower their guard. Kinda like the tortoise and the hare. The hare, of course, thought that he'd won, so he just put his feet up, sat down and watched heavy spoilers, but all the while, the tortoise was creeping up behind him. So making people think that they've won, they've gotten what they wanted, it's very much a way to get them to fall into a false sense of security. Aemond then says,
our campaign is ended. We take the Rose Road homeward.
This is also something that reminded me of the German general surrendering in Band of Brothers. What do you mean spoilers? But the Rose Road is the path from King's Landing to Highgarden and Old Town. It's sort of like a golden path that connects these three big locations. In the book, Aemond was harassed by those loyal to the Blacks on their way up to King's Landing when traversing it. The latter mentioned that Tumbleton is also just off the road near King's Landing. Also, shoutouts to Miserable Move 7956 on Reddit for providing a detailed map of Westeros. Aemond then thinks he's done, but he gets Columboed as Daemon says, just one more thing. Give me my nephew. In the book, Daemon was seen by the Blacks as being a major threat, so it's a 2-for-1 as they compress him for info and also remove him from the board. Hostages are also a common thing in Westeros. Theon Greyjoy was notably taken by the Starks, and this happened after a failed Greyjoy rebellion. Luckily, Aemond's expected that this is something that Daemon would demand, and thus he gives over this fake one and basically heads with his team to Tumbleton. Daemon, the Heron, his head is fake, is a boy from a merchant family who has been strong-armed to play the role. His mother was threatened, and thus he has to abide, and it actually fixes a problem that I had with the earlier seasons of the show. Obviously, they completely admitted him from the series, and I thought that meant that they were just going to kind of jam him in last minute in the same way they had Corlys and Lohar having this big long beef that we've never heard about. However, doing it this way I actually think works quite well. Most, if not all of the Blacks haven't met him, and there is the feeling that the Greens wouldn't betray him. And boy is he also very lucky that they executed Otto, as his head would be on the chopping block. And by executed Otto, I mean he left and had a nice night's sleep.
Sorry guys, stay alive.
Yeah, see you later mate. Daemon then leaves with them, and the drums begin to thunder as we cut to the titles. There's an edition towards the end of them now that has the taking of King's Landing by Rhaenyra last week, and in it we have her at the front, then Daemon to the right with Syrax behind her, and Mysaria to the left. They're also joined by Corlys, and what I believe is Alicent and Helena. This could even show that history remembers them as being on the side of the Blacks, as they're of course the ones that let them in the Red Keep. We also see some rats on the ground, with these playing a big symbolic role in the episode.
The rat symbolizes obviousness.
After this, we then see the small folk cheer her at the end of the episode, which closes out the new editions. This video is sponsored by ZocDoc. So this one's for our friends across the pond. ZocDoc is the free revolutionary healthcare website that connects you with top-rated doctors in your area so your summer stays awesome instead of you getting sick. ZocDoc allows you to quickly search and compare high-quality in-network doctors across nearly every speciality. On their site, they have over 100,000 providers ready to help. You get to see real-time appointment openings and pick a time that actually works for you with your beach days, barbecues, and road trips. ZocDoc also allows you to book instantly with just one click. There's no phone calls, no sweaty waiting rooms full of paperwork, just click, book, done. Whether it's that weird summer rash, aching teeth from all the ice cream, or just feeling off while everyone's soaking up the sun, get it sorted fast. ZocDoc appointments usually happen within 24 to 72 hours, and you can even grab same-day spots in many cases. So stop putting it off while the sun's shining. Head over to ZocDoc.com/heavy spoilers and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Keep your summer vibes strong, go to my link in the description or scan the QR code and hit up ZocDoc.com/heavy spoilers and let ZocDoc find the perfect doctor for you. Thanks. We then cut to Rhaenyra, who says,
The air is thick with ghosts.
She's haunted by visions of those she's lost in the entry, including seeing Jace walking in the halls. The madness is starting to creep in, and she begins to crack under the pressure of grief. You see, kids, you have to remember that she's lost 2 sons within a matter of weeks and hasn't really had any time to deal with it. She's then been thrust into power and has to basically handle everything with the war. It's often said that ghosts are just the memory of the past, but the past is something that's been full of trauma. I was also expecting Jacerys to appear in this episode as well, and though they don't do that, it might be something that they do in another entry. As we see, she's in her father's old bedroom though, which is the spot where the character died. Over the course of the episode, she also struggles to sleep there. Rhaenyra holds Jacerys in such a high regard and is aiming to bring peace to the realm as he did. Along with Jaehaera, they brokered in one of the longest reigning pieces in the entire mythology, but he didn't exactly keep it that way. His decision to name her as heir, her illegitimate sons, all the shit with the Greens, it all just caused so much fallout.
He was strong then.
You what, love? Strong? What do you mean by that? You saying them strong boys? But I did think Rhaenyra in this episode is basically determined to justify her father's decision to name her his heir, and she refuses to even take a breath to rest. Daemon then says they should have burned the Hightower army, but this isn't how Rhaenyra thinks Jacerys would have ruled. Personally, I think her weakness is that she's trying to follow her dad too much, and Jacerys wasn't really built for war. Rhaenyra is basically trying to live up to what he wanted her to be though, so she's determined to be good, at least for a time. We then kickstart a great marching scene where we see her walking through the halls while the Green's decorations are ripped down. I love that we constantly have this happening throughout, and it leads to a big bonfire at the end. For now though, she's determined to have a very big coronation, which is the same thing that the Greens did for Aegon at the Dragon Pit. They use Aegon's crown to try and cement his legitimacy, and she wants to have lots of tourneys, get people to subscribe, throw feasts, and just have a ball. Just in the same way Aegon had the Conqueror's sword, the Conqueror's army, and the Conqueror's crown, she has to do symbolic things to show that she's the right person to rule. Even last week, like her killing Otto in front of everyone, that was showing that she was ruthless and could be the rightful ruler. So now she basically needs to have a show of wealth, that she's very, very rich and kind of what you expect a royal to be. However, there's a few problems blocking that. The crown is broke as fuck. Beyond that, Septon Eustace is also refusing to declare her as the one true ruler. This is something I actually think is playing to a theory time that we'll talk about in our spoiler section, but him refusing to do this is very, very important. But because she has no money, she's gonna have to win over the small folk another way. Though the crown had been flush with gold upon the passing of King Jacerys, Aegon II had seized the treasury along with the crown, and his master of coin, Tywin Lannister, had shipped off 3/4 of the late king's wealth for safekeeping. King Aegon had spent every penny of the portion kept in King's Landing, leaving only empty vaults for his half-sister when she took the city. The rest of Jacerys' treasure had been entrusted to the High Towers of Old Town, the Lannisters of Castle Rock, and the Iron Bank of Bravos, and was beyond the Queen's grasp. I love how they walk side by side as well, just as they did when entering the castle. Episode 2's Inside the Episode explained they were intended to look like one synchronized unit, which I definitely feel here. She then runs into fake Darren, and I love how she introduces herself like she has no idea who he is.
We've not met.
I think it's fantastic how they play it here though, and I have to say, Emma Darcy completely knocks it out the park. I know in episode 1 I was like, open the fucking door. I didn't really like that line, but I think this is, credit where it's due. Strongest performance yet. Absolutely fantastic. Bloody amazing. Rhaenyra just goes through a range of emotions throughout, and we get her being royal and polite, naive, cunning, and also just shell-shocked. Here she demands to know what he knew about Aemond's role in Aegon becoming king, or where Aemond and Aegon are. But he knows nothing, Jon Snow. In the book, Orwell was then sent to the dungeon around this point, and Rhaenyra appointed her own maester and had posters put up everywhere offering a reward for the return of Aegon. After saying Daemon's to be confined to his cell, we then see as the green banners pulled down. I do also wonder if the Faith of the Seven Symbols will remain up, as they were put up by Alicent towards the end of Season 1. He then says that Daemon is younger than she imagined, which is the first hint that he is in fact an imposter. Daemon also explains that he's a claimant to the throne, and thus needs to go. This is much like how the Lannisters ordered every one of Robert Baratheon's bastards to be murdered, and thinking about what went down with Robert Baratheon. Star, make yourself laugh. You bastard. Whine, you shit. They never tell you how they all shit themselves. They don't put that part in the songs. Stupid boy! Get out! Rhaenyra then heads to the small council chamber for the first of her bad news this episode. Like the book she's broke, and Orwell explains that Tylan divided the gold and sent it away for safekeeping. He thinks it might have been sent to Old Town, Casterly Rock, and the Iron Bank of Bravos. However, Casterly Rock in the book was sacked by the Greyjoys. This is something I think might be swapped for the Triarchy remnants that we saw last week, but Rhaenyra has to basically go out and get a payday loan. Mysaria also believes that Orwell's not lying.
No one asked you.
There is a bit of tension between them, and in the book, the pair were actually lovers at this point. Though never officially seated with the Queen's small council, the woman now known as Lady Misery became the mistress of whisperers in all but name, with eyes and ears in every brothel, alehouse, and pot shop in King's Landing, and in the halls and bedchambers of the mighty as well. Though the airs had thickened the body that had been so lithe and lissom, Prince Daemon remained in her thrall, and called upon her every evening, with Queen Rhaenyra's apparent blessing. "Let Daemon slake his hungers where he will," she is reported to have said, "and we shall do the same." Septon Eustace suggests somewhat waspishly that her Grace's own hungers were slaked largely with sweetmeats, cakes, and lamprey pie, as Rhaenyra grew even more stout during her days in King's Landing. Now, I don't think they'll be having Darcy put on weight for the show, but they do discuss how she goes from the Realm's Delight to Rhaenyra the Cruel around this time. Corlys then says we must presume Sir Tylan's dead. We last saw him fall into the drink at the Battle of the Gullet, and his fate is kind of up in the air. The only other person who might know is Jasper, aka Ironrod, with this nickname being because of the virility of his member. His cockmate, his cock. But he got beheaded last week, mid-sentence. And he might have even I don't think he was going to explain where the gold was, but he might have. Also, love how everyone's kind of annoyed, but Daemon just laughs at that revelation. Rhaenyra then says that Aegon's coronation was done in haste, but she needs to have a proper one. However, Mysaria reminds her that having a lavish event while a small folk are starving would not set a good example. It's a theme of the episode where our socialist queen steals from the rich and then gives to the poor. It also kind of mirrors real life as well, as in jolly old England we had a massive lavish funeral for the queen and then a big coronation for the king during a time in which people were still struggling with the cost of living. There was lots of reports and uproar about it, and I do wonder if the show will reflect that, but again, it does come from the book. A tax on property was decreed. Rich merchants in their manses or beggars in their hovels all must pay, depending on how much land they took up. Not even whores are safe, the small folk told each other. The see you next Tuesday tax will be next, and then the tail tax. The rats must pay their share. She even set things up where she said that those who'd paid taxes to Aegon previously had funded his war and thus committed treason. In order to get back in the good graces, they had to pay their tax back and a bit more to make things right. They also started throwing executions in the dragon pit, but charging people to watch. So the show is playing things differently as she's considering the impact of her rule on an already ready to explode tinderbox that is King's Landing. But love and hate are two faces of the same coin, as fresh heads began appearing daily upon the spikes above the city gates, accompanied by ever more exacting taxes. The coin turned. The girl they had once cheered as the realm's delight had grown into a grasping and vindictive woman. Men said, a queen as cruel as any king before her. One wit named Rhaenyra King Maegor with teats, and for 100 years thereafter, Maegor's teats was a common curse amongst the King's Landers. Now beyond this, I think Mysaria brings a fresh perspective to the small council as someone who's seen the absolute worst of the city and how desperate the small folk are. This is something we saw in Season 2 with Ulf and also Hugh and his family when the price of food went up. As well as this, the Triarchy remnants are sacking the villages and charging ransom for women that they take. As mentioned earlier, this is pretty much what happened at Lannisport and Castle Rock, including the women being kidnapped. Not only this, but the granaries are empty and the fields are fallow. There's no food, and Rhaenyra must find grain for bread or the people will go hungry.
It is a never-ending inconvenience, this insistence of the people being fed.
What a line from Daemon, but he's quickly reminded how dangerous a starving population is. This is something that both calls back to Season 2 and foreshadows what's next. Mysaria convinced Rhaenyra to win the small folk over, which included sending boats of food to King's Landing. Provided some relief to the people who were being starved to death both by the war and the rich hoarding their food. At the time, it won people over, but again, as they say in the book, the coin can quickly turn. It of course also plays off real-life events like the Russian Revolution, which was caused by extreme poverty. Rhaenyra then says she's sending ravens to Lady Joanna Lannister. In the book, Joanna is currently under siege by Dalton Greyjoy and his Ironborn, but as you mentioned, I feel this plot is being swapped for the Triarchy remnants. I do think that we're going to see how the tax basically swallows up the small folk in the following episodes, as at the moment, Rhaenyra is only taxing the rich. However, she will run out of money very soon. The rich will likely move, do something, get accountants in, put it all on business expenses, something like that to get around it, and thus the small folk will be turned upon. Daemon then seems happy with her, reminding them who rules the realm and that they don't want to bring her small council to King's Landing. Nothing but snakes, just me and my boy from now on. She also gets the grim news that Aemond has taken Harrenhal, burned the garrison, and killed Simon Strong. Daemon then asks about Alice, but Orwell hasn't heard of her. In the book, little is known of the character, which does track with how the show's handling her. According to some reviewers, we won't see Aemond until episode 5 at least, and then I think we'll likely see the flip side of these events with the Greens. I imagine we're going to get some Luigi's Mansion shit with Aemond, and then possibly see Aegon going to Sunfire, and then Kristen and the gang at Harrenhal. Daemon then mentions her being a maester of sorts, and naturally Orwell wouldn't know her as women cannot be maesters. Alice in many ways is a lot like Rhaenyra, and she was denied a castle because of her gender. Regardless, Rhaenyra wants Aemond and Sheepstealer found, and they might even think they're Team Green and be less likely to strike, as they could think there's another dragon out there. If you love Sheepstealer as well then, because I know you love to mess stuff up, I know what you like, you love rushing in places, causing trouble, you cheeky bugger, but if you love doing that, then why not check out our merch store right below the video. There we've just launched our Sheepstealer inspired shirt, and we also have our Caraxes one as well. We've got lots of Knights of the Seven Kingdoms stuff too, and big discounts running across the store. The coin must be replenished at the Heavy Spoilers shop. We then hear Baela has been tasked with finding them as a scout, and a bounty's being offered. In the book, she sent out hunting parties to find Aegon II, his children, and the 2 knights sent to protect him. So I think the show is just changing things up a bit here, and that she or Daemon might come across Rhaena. Interestingly, Rhaenyra also offers up Harrenhal to the slayer of Aemond One Eye. We know that Alice Rivers is desperate for Harrenhal as well, and she has the boy with mother's issues at her mercy. She could kill him and take it, but book readers will know that's wildly different from the source material, so I don't think they'll do it. But yeah, worth discussing anyway. We then hear that the rats have eaten all the candles, and these basically provide all the light at night. You know, back in the day, kids, they didn't have light bulbs and phone torches to guide the way, and I know this isn't back in the day, but yeah, no lights at night. Also, don't think it's a coincidence that we end with a big bonfire of green tapestry, as them needing to burn this could also be fallout of the butterfly effect of Aegon and Rhaenyra's actions. Beyond that, rats are something that have appeared throughout the series. They constantly pop up in this episode and hound the queen throughout. We're told that Aegon killed all the rat catchers, and we saw them hanging in season 2. This is because they were unable to find cheese, so they killed them all off to basically cover all their bases. It angered Otto at the time, and having the bodies displayed outside for the small folk to see would have caused them to riot, as the widows would weep and curse Aegon's name. The rats also appeared a lot during season 1, and they were behind the walls and hiding within the castle, subtly showing the rot that was festering behind closed doors. They occasionally popped up during a major event to show the rot coming to the surface. Rats, of course, spread disease and plague, and are scavengers that pick up the crumbs of what's left behind. They're also symbolic of treachery and basically show that the rats are closing in. Have you seen the end of The Departed? The last shot is like a rat running across a thing. They're symbolic. The fact that they're now out in the open here as well links them with the idea that they're coming to the surface. The decay in what they bring is linked with the institutional failures, and they're here because of the Greens and Rhaenyra's actions. They bring in a slow poison that chips away at the Red Keep and breaks down what the families are trying to achieve. Helaena even said in Season 2 that she was scared of the rats, which directly foreshadowed the Ratcatcher coming to kill her son. Larys Strong was also nicknamed the Rat King, and him moving the coin has caused a lot of these issues as well. Visually and thematically, the rats work as a way to show the decay that's rising to the surface. WKNOFM.org said that though the dragons are creatures that run the skies, the rats run things behind the castle walls and now in the halls themselves. These creatures come more and more to the surface as things fall apart, and they're the harbingers of doom and fire and blood. Beyond that, I do wonder if the rats also represent the lords and small folk, which is something that I'll touch more upon later. In general though, I do feel like the show hasn't really done enough to show the plight of the small folk, with Rhaenyra not caring about them being a big deal. There is the worry that they could end up bringing down the royals and they could overrun the castle just like the rats. If we go back to the tapestry at the start, the rat at the end was linked with the people, so that could be something they're trying to hammer home. The queen is then told she needs to appoint a queen's guard, which is a job she hands over to her husband. This is funny as well, as that was the job her father had her do, and this ended up with her choosing Kristen Cole. I love the way this scene is edited as well, with everyone basically picking away at her and asking her questions. We then learn that the Hightower Bannermen rule the Arbor, which is where most of the wine in Westeros comes from. House Red wine supported Aegon II during the dance, and as such, the price of wine is tripled. We then see as Rhaenyra confronts Alicent. This story is vastly different from the book, where Alicent's kept in chains, and some even said that the mother and daughter were sold off to the brothels. Alicent did get some mercy though, as Rhaenyra said, "For the sake of our father who loved you once." Alicent also put forth the idea that the realm be divided between Aegon II and Rhaenyra. The show has decided to go with the childhood friendship plan though, but I do expect Alicent to drop the line, "Bastard blood shed at war," which I know she doesn't sound like, I'm sorry. She's obviously just seen her dad beheaded in the throne room, and Alicent claims that she has no idea where the gold is, and that the council basically resented her from the start. This is something that we saw in Season 2 as she was frozen at the small council once Aemond took up the role of Prince Regent. It also matches what the Iron Rod said last week, with him implying that Alicent slept her way to the top. Yep, you can be a mother to the king or queen yourself, but misogyny still bleeds through the cracks of society. Helaena then asks Rhaenyra directly if it made her feel better about losing Jace. Both she and the queen are in a similar predicament, as both lost their child in this pointless war. She's quite sassy as well, whereas in the book, Helena's inconsolable and confined to her bedchamber, and post-invasion, Rhaenyra locks her up. What really sends her over the edge though is the death of her son Maelor, who infamously is not in the show. Rhaenyra then claps back by saying she was supposed to kill Aegon instead. I like how Helena's unfazed, as those two had a loveless marriage, but she does kind of glance at Alicent and might possibly even think why she was willing to give up her own child willingly when both she and Rhaenyra have had theirs taken from them. She also says that it was Aegon who did that to himself with regard to fleeing, but we know it's Larys Strong who masterminded it. Alicent then asks if Rhaenyra will blame her for what the men have done. To be fair to Alicent, she has kept her word as well. It's mainly the others that have been quite duplicitous. Alicent then says that no one knows what Aegon looks like now, and if Larys tries to raise him up, Rhaenyra can claim it's an imposter. This is kind of foreshadowing the twist as well, and it also sort of plays into a plot that might be popping up down the line. In the book, a man who looked like a corpse appeared and claimed that the dragons were a natural and a blight from Valyria. He cursed Rhaenyra and was faithful to the faith of the Seven, and part of me wonders if the show will change his moment to be Aegon instead of him. It might be true to the book though, as we did see someone having their hand cut off in Season 2, which could be that. In the time that Rhaenyra has been gone though, religion has really taken a hold of the kingdom, and Septon Eustace even warns the queen against falling foul of the faith of the Seven. So I wonder if this will be House of the Dragon's faith militant moment, and it could destroy her like it almost destroyed Cersei. The faith was here before Aegon the Conqueror, and I even suspect the rich will use the faith skepticism of her to position the small folk against the queen. Rhaenyra then seems to have a panic attack and says that when the challenge to her and Aemond is dead, the mother and daughter will be let go. I do wonder if she's actually going to keep her word though, or if it's going to be something like what she plans for Daemon. Like I said, Alicent and Helaena are sent straight to the brothels, so they could do that in the same way she planned to send Daemon to the wall. Helaena also says she does not wish to be in this room either.
I don't want to stay in this room.
Now this could foreshadow something in the future. It looks like this is the place that Tommen left out of, and Helaena could be seeing this moment echo throughout history. I will talk about this more in the spoiler section, but this room is very, very important, potentially. Rhaenyra then says that she wants it to be declared they've found Aegon dead. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. She also wants Joffrey returned from the Vale. This is something that could then reveal Rhaenyra wasn't on the boat sent east, and I do think eventually this will set her and Daemon to butt heads over how to deal with the child. We then see her meet Mysaria, and a lot of this episode features the old walk and talk that was made famous by the West Wing. Within Mysaria has never actually been inside the palace, and even though she was sleeping with Daemon, she was kept separate from his actual life. Mysaria was then brushed away and basically forced out by Viserys, and this is quite a big moment for the character. They talk about where the gold could be at, and Rhaenyra says, in a very on-the-nose way,
But would I not be simple to think that in a house as big as this one, there were only one rat?
We also see that Rhaenyra is again hesitant about executing Daemon. While he could be a claimant to the throne, she could also be classed as a kinslayer if she killed him. That's said to come with a curse, and a lot of people look down on Aemond for killing Lucerys. He's also committed no crimes unlike his brothers. She then sees someone who looks like Jace, which makes her start to spin out. The guy is just looks maxing, walking around the catwalk like Cavicula, and it makes her wonder why she shouldn't kill Daemon when her children are dead. You can clearly see them sowing the seeds of madness in her, but it's a lot more justified than what happened with Dany. She also calls for Olinda Massey to return to her service. She appeared throughout season 1 and 2 and helped to gather the dragon seeds. Massey must be at Rhaenyra's side moving forward as well, because book readers, you know already why. The Queen is also very paranoid as she asks for the staff to be questioned and for anyone loyal to the Hightowers to be replaced. She then goes to meet with Sept and Eustace in the throne room. We get a great shot where the statue of Viserys hangs over them, and it gives the idea that he's looking down and judging her. Now, while her coronation is being delayed, she asks simply to be anointed in full view of the public. Just one problem though. He's already proclaimed Aegon II as the rightful ruler. He then absolutely mugs her off and says,
And I now sit the throne.
So you now say.
He also doesn't believe her at all and says that they've not seen Aegon's remains, nor have the Silent Sisters been called to tend to his body. It also seems to me that the Septon's trying to save face as he understands how things will look to the public. If he's saying there's a new monarch again after just having a new one come in, they'll be like,
You're joking. Not another one?
Viserys also anointed Rhaenyra as heir in front of the realm, but Sept and Eustace went along with the Greens in their plot to usurp the throne. So people will cast doubt on him too. As we know, Aegon is still alive, and I think there's a lot of doubt in general around Rhaenyra's claims that he's perished. I think she knows it as well, that the character probably isn't dead, but just wants herself appointed quickly. She then says that the gods willed her to rise up and cast out the usurper. He rejects the idea of seeing Adam and his dragon as a sign though, and that she has the divine right to rule.
My gods do not deal in dragons.
He basically rattles off about them being unnatural, and in saying this, he's also saying it about the Targaryens. It's a sentiment that Raymond Fossaway shared in Night of the Seven Kingdoms, when he hilariously called them incestuous aliens who use blood magic. We also must remember that the Targaryens converted the faith of the Seven when Aegon the Conqueror took over Westeros. This is something that he only did to appease the public. Before this, they actually worshipped the old gods of Valyria. However, by converting to the Seven, he was able to stop any resistance from the Faith Militant, but they're a group that they must keep sweet. Aegon easily could have burned them, but it's vital to have peace amongst the small folk. This is something that Rhaenyra will need to keep a hold of as well in King's Landing, especially after stealing supplies from the rich. I even wonder if we're going to get a sort of Henry VIII thing. Now, in case you don't know, because you haven't heard about it, or you might be American, I will let you off. They don't teach us a lot of your history in our school. Weirdly, the independence thing, we completely skip over that. So in case you don't know, the church basically said that they wouldn't grant his divorce. Back in the day, Rome held power over all, like the faith of the Seven does here. But Henry just loved getting divorced and doing lots of things to his ex-wives, so he basically went to war with the church and then established the Church of England as a way to do what he wanted. This gave him religious power and meant that his church could override the decisions of the Pope. Now that is a very, very, very top-level view of stuff, but I did wonder if they were doing something similar. Especially with him saying,
With respect, I advise you, do not make an enemy of the faith.
We of course saw how strong the Faith Militant were during the main series, but they were disbanded during the rule of Jacerys. Sept and Eustace does represent that religious pushback though, and he's one of the first people to stand up to Rhaenyra. It's just a reminder to the viewers that the religious here don't take things lying down, and who else doesn't take things lying down is who Rhaenyra comes across in the next scene. That is Corlys, and this scene is actually way bigger than it is in the book, and they give Steve Toussaint a hell of a lot to do. Now, I know last week I was like, oh, I don't know if I like the line read on the, if this is victory, I pray I never win another bit from the book. Didn't think it was a good line reading. However, I have to say, the guy is excellent in his scenes here, and him shouting about the bastards later, I think is probably the best moment that Corlys has ever had. But they weren't bastards, they were very, very strong boys. It all builds out from this moment, though, where Corlys reveals Alan and Adam are his sons. Rhaenyra mentions that she did not guess, and this is probably because Adam has black hair and Alan cuts his off. She then says they're stout of heart and that she owes them a great debt for their support. Corlys then asks to make Alan his heir and legitimize them. It's a sore subject for Rhaenyra though. Corlys then says that without that his line would end and his name would be erased without them. Now if you cast your mind back to season 1, you might even remember that Corlys said the following.
History does not remember blood. It remembers names.
He was even willing to accept Jacerys as the heir to Driftmark, even though he clearly wasn't Laenor's. To him, Laenor is also dead as well, so getting denied this is a grim reminder of everything he's lost and how he won't even be remembered. He then says that a word from the throne is but a simple thing. She herself received it from the king, so she was protected when he passed on, but now she cannot possibly do it, and it's all just to save face. She knights him as Adam of Hull instead of Adam Valerian. This is something that enrages Corlys, and though they don't explain why he gets the name Hull in the book, I just love the way the show's fleshed it out here and shows a genuine human reaction. Corlys has done so much for the character as he's lost his wife, castle, and most of his fleet, but now he's being denied this very simple favour. Now I can see things from both sides as well. I can see things from both sides. Both sides are great, but the legitimacy of her children has plagued her ever since they were born, and it's led to this whole mess and is something that she doesn't want to repeat. If she raises up 2 bastards, it will bring the legitimacy of her kids up again, especially with Joffrey now being her heir. Corlys rightly takes this as an insult though, as he defended her when her own children were called bastards. He says she's doing this purely because she's ashamed, and yeah, it's all just, again, done to save face. When Corlys, that's the guy you should be riding for. This builds to the point that he even calls Joffrey a bastard, which is a massive thing to say. It's something that actually got his brother beheaded, and in the book, his kids actually sought restitution. I'd love it if they brought that back around and showed the consequences that kind of spun out from that moment, with Corlys being loyal to the throne instead of loyal to his family. In the book, they even have a point where it's decreed that anyone who calls their kids bastards will have their tongues cut off, but it shows how much he doesn't give a shit. His legacy is all he really cares about, and the fact she's denying it shows she's not worth riding for. Now, we did mention earlier that Alicent kind of gets this line in the book, but I much prefer it being given to Corlys. It's setting something that's coming up down the line, and this causes a major rift between the Queen and her hand, which is something I'll need to save for the spoiler section. Outside, she also runs into Baela, which again is a reminder of the loss of Jacerys, and it's quite a cold interaction as the pair don't even talk. She too is almost like a ghost, and much like the vision of Jace that she's just passed in the halls. She then heads to Viserys' bedroom, but she's unable to sleep there. This metaphorically shows she doesn't feel like she lives up to her father and is unworthy to take his place. So she slinks off to Daemon and then nestles into him. This is the only safe place for her, and he's probably one of the only other people on Earth who knows what her life's like. And even then, he's not really in the same position that she is. The next morning, she's then dressed in her royal attire by Massey. This was, of course, made to give a nod to Dany in the main show, and it makes her seem like a regal dragon rider. Being crowned, we learn she plans to go before the small folk and then listen to their petitions. Massey talks to her and advises against taking a sword, as it would go against what she wants to project. Jewels would also be tone deaf as well to the poor, so she's instead given a chain. One problem though, her period started. Now in the book, when she stepped down from the Iron Throne after demanding that people bend the knee, it was noticed that she had been cut. And as her lord husband, Prince Daemon, escorted her from the hall, cuts were seen upon her grace's legs, and the palm of her left hand, wrote Eustace. Drops of blood fell to the floor as she went past, and wise men looked at one another, though none dared speak the truth about the Iron Throne had spurned her, and her days upon it would be few. I did think we were going to get that scene when she was gripping the armrests, but they did end up avoiding it. However, when this happened, it was taken as a bad omen that she wasn't intended to rule. It followed her long after she died, and was even a moment that
Bobby B remembered Bobby B.
Legend has it that as she left the hall later, blood trickled down her legs and hands, proving the Iron Throne had spurned her. Nonsense. It's a chair made of steel blades. Rhaenyra had wanted it all her life and had sacrificed 2 sons for it. She likely gripped the damn thing too tight.
whew, and the restraint I am showing now not to do an impression is something to behold. But it highlights that history remembers her as someone desperate for power, whereas this show makes it seem like she's already burdened by it. I do think the writers have decided to use her period as something that could be used to show this blood, and maybe next episode she'll bleed when she's on the throne. People could even see this as being a reason why women can't rule. Calls back to her line about having the weak and feeble body of a woman, but the heart of a king. Now this got a lot of backlash online, but it was said in real life by Elizabeth I to her army before fighting against the Spanish Armada. But I was angry, grr, as even historical dramas set in fantasy worlds, they better have the values that I hold today in 2026. She's clearly not having her best day though, but pushes on to listen to the small folks' petitions. It's a clear reflection of the scene that Aegon had in season 2, where it was like, the first time that he actually seemed likeable. He's also joined by the Hand, much like how Otto joined him, and even the conversation topics about sheeps and dragons are pretty much the same. The woman asks why they couldn't take the fleece before they were carted off. However, this does not fix things, as it means there will be no meat for the butchers and subsequently the people. The unconventional ruler then suggests something wild as she allows people to hunt in the Kingswood. However, she says they can't hunt boar or elk. This is actually a line from the book, and it's said by Tristan Truefire after Rhaenyra's rule. Book Rhaenyra, as we mentioned, taxed the people more than the UK likes to tax us, but in the show, she's going after the rich. So giving her a line like this makes a lot of sense, as Truefire was trying to undo the pain her taxes caused. We then have Sylvie coming to petition. She's the madam of the brothel mothers, and was the woman to whom Aemond kept giving repeat business. He's got a new mummy figure now though, in the form of Alice Rivers. Now in the book, a woman named Sylvana Sand was the mother to another pretender to the throne. That was Daemon Palehair, who also made more decrees. She said he was the 4-year-old bastard of Aegon II, but for the show, they could be making them Aemond. Daemon came out with some demands that were seemed crazy, such as making it illegal to be women, and therefore he wasn't that popular.
I am getting so tired of this woke world.
But you should hold the values I hold today in 2026. The fact they keep bringing Sylvie back though makes me think she's gonna be important and that a lot of this stuff's being repurposed. Sylvie then says that the Lords brought everything they could for her storehouses and hoarded it all, and that she wants Rhaenyra to do something about it. I love the way this is shot as well, with us getting a blur around the edge of the frame and the music showing Rhaenyra's uncomfortable. She's clearly struggling with her period, and the throne is really difficult to sit on in general, so it's making things worse. We then get a great moment where we switch from the throne to the chair of the small council. Both are the hot seat, and it just highlights Rhaenyra's under pressure wherever she goes. Mustn't be nice sitting in this all day when you got cramps as well, and we see as Massey brings her a drink. Rhaenyra also served as cupbearer for her father on the council as well, and this kind of gives her an insight into his thinking. Either way, Daemon is having none of this socialism, and he says that it's war, and thus people suffer. However, Mysaria reminds him that some suffer more than others. Rhaenyra then asks about Baelor and Sheepstealer, but she says she saw only Sunfire dead and decaying. Now I do wonder if she is mistaken, as Aegon's dragon is actually alive in the book, and if Aegon gets to Sunfire, it might rise up once more. Or I could be reaching, but in the book he killed people trying to take Rook's Rest, which is the same place that Aegon's heading towards. As for Rhaenyra, she just wants justice, but Mysaria is urging her to focus on the small folk, and she then holds a banquet that turns out to be a trap. I love the way this is shot as well, with them being in the centre while the banners are torn down around them. As we know, both claimants, Aegon and Rhaenyra, created their own banners, and like Dunk, Ulf doesn't know how to style himself after the Targaryen name's rejected. Daemon is sick of his shit though, and general demeanour. He then styles himself Ulf the White, and in the book he got this due to his white hair. Hugh then chooses the name Hammer due to his trade as a blacksmith, and Adam is named Adam of Hull. And he can barely hide his disappointment. Also, love how Ulf struggles to kneel with the cloak getting in the way. Daemon then knights the 3, reciting the oath. It's a world away from Raymond Fossaway's epic knighting during Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and Daemon basically looks bored by the whole thing. He sees knighting the dragon seeds as beneath him, and it's a kind of snobbery that will come back around to bite him. Ulf is quite unimpressed though and asks, is that it? Hugh then chases after the Queen and asks where he'll be staying in King's Landing. We learn that he can't find his wife as she's gone to live with her brother in Tumbleton. This builds off last week when we saw her look up at the dragons arriving in the city, and as we later learn, Tumbleton has fallen to the Greens. This means that she's in a lot of danger, and I do wonder if she's going to be caught in the crossfire next week. She then tells him to send for her, and they'll have a house on Visenya's Hill. In the book, he and Ulf were given small holdings on Driftmark, which they celebrated by beating women. They were also given some of the Lord's daughters as wives. Lord Rosby and Stokeworth, blacks who had gone green to avoid the dungeons, attempted to turn black again. But the Queen declared that faithless friends were worse than foes and ordered their lying tongues to be removed before their executions. Their deaths left her with a nettlesome problem of succession. However, as it happened, each of the faithless friends left a daughter. Rosby's was a maid of 12, Stokeworth's a girl of 6. Prince Daemon proposed that the former be wed to Hardhugh, the blacksmith's son, who had taken to calling himself Hugh Hammer, the latter to Ulf the Sot, now simply Ulf White, keeping their lands black while suitably rewarding the seeds for their valor in battle. You definitely get that there's a feeling of regret from the Targaryens here as well, and that they just want them all out of the way now that they've got their power. And it may cost them. Alicent then comes to visit her in her room. She requests that her father's remains be sent to Old Town so they can be buried alongside her mother's. Rhaenyra then says how Alicent ruled the realm in all but name while Viserys was ill. The Queen then asks for advice and basically how her former BFF would have dealt with the plight of the small folk. Alicent then explains how she had to be pragmatic and make hard choices while closing off the compassionate part of herself. Rhaenyra then says that she can still be a good person and rule like her father, but Alicent quips back and basically says you must lose some of yourself to rule, and that Viserys basically ruled in a world of his own construction. Part of me wonders if this is actually referring to his model making and how he basically focused on that as a way to escape from the pressures of the kingdom. It could also refer to the fact that the world of Westeros is structured for men to rule. Either way, she welcomes the nobles of King's Landing in what's the worst episode of Come Dine With Me ever. She jokes that they pledge their loyalty later than she'd like, but she is a conciliator. This is a nickname that was given to her father's predecessor Jacerys I, but it also kind of feels like a nod to the Godfather, because this is very mob-like. She says she'll fight for every crumb, and this was played upon in the tagline of the Weeks Ahead trailer, which shows how petty her quest for power is. One of the attendees also says, you know what? I always thought the High Towers were snakes, despite there being no record of him doing so. The rich are then served rat, which is intended to show them what the commoners of King's Landing ate while the rich hoarded food.
And here we go. I hope you're hungry for nothing.
It builds perfectly off the rat metaphor before and works so well, not only in a symbolic way, but also like they've been clearing out all the rats in the kingdom. Also, love the bit where she basically asks if the guy would steal food to stop his family from starving. And he says no, and she's like,
Lie genteel in your grave.
just give them the Emmy now. It plays upon the idea that it's right to steal if it feeds your family and shows that these people have never really been desperate. She sees it as a rich person's role to ensure that those in need are helped, but like Daemon, these rich people look down on the poor and see them as rats who steal every crumb. So she sends her guards to rob them while they dine. I feel like this will no doubt come back to bite her though, as the rich will not accept this insult and threat to their bottom line. There's a reason in real life why politicians who go after the rich don't tend to do well, and they'll have all kinds of industry to use against the crown. This is why I also think we see Torrhen Manderley smirking. He realises this is the game that he's already won, and is kind of laughing that Rhaenyra is making an attempt to take them down when they're the ones with the power. To him, it's all a game, or sort of a Game of Thrones, if you will. Played by Dan Fogler, you may recognise him from the Fantastic Beasts movies, or more likely The Walking Dead. In the book, Torrhen was sent to King's Landing to support the Queen, and there he was described as clever and corpulent. They are kind of changing things for the show though, as he was actually helpful towards Rhaenyra and didn't trust the dragon seeds. In the series, he does appear to be a bit of an antagonist, as he says the small folk may even forget they went hungry due to Rhaenyra's blockade. During her reign in the books, a lot of propaganda was used against her, which was suspected to be Larys Strong's doing. However, I do wonder if this will be Torrhen's role in the show. Daemon then says that they'll resent them for it, but she just says they're merchants and minor nobles. May not feed the city forever, but it will win the hearts and minds, which is something a lot of nobles seem to ignore. Rhaenyra at this point does seem to be on the right track though, and isn't shying away from ruling or doing anything out of spite. She also plans to send Daemon to the Vale to get Lady Jane to pay up. The men of the Vale haven't arrived yet, and so Rhaenyra is expecting coin instead. This sets him up to find out who is riding Sheepstealer at the Battle of the Gullet, and I think it's in the next episode that he'll likely come across Rhaenyra. Though I don't think she'll be in the castle itself, I do think she might be off in the wild like how Nettles was in the book. But Rhaenyra puts a lot of responsibility on herself and thinks if she can't administer a city, then how can she rule the Seven Kingdoms? Daemon is like, well, you've got 6 dragons and Aegon only had 3. It gives insight into his psyche, as while he wanted to rule, he's far from suitable for it. He then suggests that they could go and take Dorne, which is something even the Conqueror couldn't do. It wouldn't join the rest of the kingdoms until the reign of Daemon II, and is something that he sees as a prize. Daemon then wants to go and take Essos with her, and also the Free Cities. He specifically names Yi Ti, which draws inspiration from Imperial China. Daemon then says that there's a city where men have wings, but the source material explains that they are in fact leather wings, and not like half dragon, half human hybrids. But Daemon is basically a figure like Alexander the Great, who only cares about conquering the next kingdom. He dreams of never-ending conquests and building a Roman or Greek empire, while she just wants to ensure that people don't starve. Daemon then explains that his brother was a good man, but he had no vision of greatness. Daemon sees himself as being the next Aegon, whereas Rhaenyra just wants to be Viserys. It's clear that he might have misinterpreted the vision as well, as we saw Dany out in Essos, and he likely thinks that that was them ruling. As we know, wasn't the case, but yeah, these visions can be misinterpreted, and he sees that as being like, we're gonna go to Essos. In Daemon's mind, he thinks they should be gods, but Rhaenyra says that there's such a thing as too much power. As we know, Valyria ended in doom, and all empires eventually end. Even the heavy spoilers empire will one day be kaput. I feel like he's got this vision in his mind, sees they've taken King's Landing again, and thinks, well, this is the first stepping stone on the way to taking over the world. And while leaving, he also hilariously reminds her that
You still have to kill Darren.
Which I thought was such a funny way to end the scene. This leads to her watching him sleep, likely seeing him as a poor innocent boy. Look at him, he just carves birds out of woods. He's like the kids I have, or had. But yeah, he seems very innocent, is just a young boy, and is a charming chap who no doubt always hits the thumbs up. However, taking him out will cement her rule, but she has to ask if she's willing to cause the same trauma that she has to Alicent. We then cut to her in her cot, looking exhausted, heading to the Great Sept of Baelor. She's buried her grief and now only knows rage. This is also the same place that Aegon was found at when he was trying to avoid his coronation, so it's a nice place to have things go down. She then anoints herself by handing out food, as opposed to the Septon doing it. The public is pleased with her, and this stunt seems to be working. I did expect some sort of riot when she handed stuff out, but seemed pretty calm. Also noticed that the fountain ornament looked like a dragon egg, and that's a nice bit of set design that. After being shaken up by her interaction with Corlys, she then heads to Alicent and says that she has Darren. Rhaenyra opts to send Darren to the wall as opposed to just killing him, and then Alicent looks at the camera directly and is like, that's just like Jon Snow. And then she does the pointing thing. Now this is slightly different in the book, as in that Corlys was the one who suggested sending their rivals and enemies to the wall, but Rhaenyra refused to, saying, "What are vows to oathbreakers?" I do like that they go this route for the show though, as it gives Alicent a chance to say,
Do you wish me to thank you?
Darren's then brought in, and the penny tree drops, with Alicent revealing that this is not her son. In a reverse egg, he was forced to bleach his hair and play the role of a prince. Reminds me a lot of The Prince and the Pauper, where two princes swap lives as they look so similar. The blacks have been played like a damn fiddle though, and this is also Aemond can take Tumbleton. This is what we learn when the Dragon Keeper arrives at the gate, and we discover that Targaryen was taken inside, and then the city and its people were taken hostage. Much like how Rhaenyra took Darren hostage. Now, this might not be the first Battle of Tumbleton, and it might simply be adapted from a line in the book that says, "It does appear that certain of those who flooded into the town, fleeing before Lord Hightower's army, were actually part of that army, sent ahead to infiltrate the ranks of the defenders." So I think we might see the battle itself, as there are major moments that take place that will change the course of the war. And those are things that we'll need to save for the spoiler section. At this point though, Rhaenyra just wants to burn it all down, but the Dragon Keeper warns her that her people would die along with it. Throughout the episode, she's been seen trying to win over the small folk, but doing this would completely undo it. It would make the people absolutely hate her, and it's a smart play by Aemond, as he's kind of neutralized the threat of her dragons. Also here, we were going to play a clip of Seth Rollins, but WWE keeps striking the channel and claiming like 2 seconds of video. So here's a picture of him as the Night King. It really asks her what is the cost though, and whether innocent lives are worth taking in order to win. In the book, it was the Greens who burned the city, and there was a savage sacking afterwards. Rhaenyra is probably going to have to do that herself though, and I think this is the thing that's going to make her massively unpopular. We then end with the green stuff set ablaze, but it's clear they're fighting back and causing their own fires. But yeah, that's how we close out the episode, and that then takes us to the spoiler section. As always, we will be ruining what happens next in the book. Oh, what, they die? Oh, no way they die, I can't believe it. So yeah, that could spoil what's coming down the line, so I bid you farewell as the credits roll on screen right now. Anyway, it's the spoiler section now. So, Ulf was asked in jest if he'd like to be the Lord of Oldtown. As we know, he always had ideas above his station and isn't happy with just being a knight. In the book, he actually swaps sides and joins the Greens after being sent to defend Tumbleton. Both Ulf and Hugh turned against Rhaenyra there, and though it's not exactly clear why they turned, it's presumed they sought money and power. I expect that Hugh may run into Cat though, and realise that, Rhaenyra wants to burn the city and she's killing people that are close to him. In the book, he was offered the lordship of Bitterbridge, but wanted Highgarden instead. However, I don't think they're going to do that. I expect that Hugh may arrive at the city and then find Cat, and he'll question his orders because Rhaenyra's like, yeah, kill everyone, burn them all to death. As for Ulf, well, he's Ulf. In the book, he was offered the lordship of Bitterbridge, but wanted Highgarden instead. Ulf then proceeded to force himself on 3 women a night and feed the ones who annoyed him to his dragon. So that could be what they're doing with him. But this is a massive turning point in the war, and Rhaenyra burning Tumbleton shows that she's not actually interested in the people. As we mentioned, she taxed the public as well, which led to riots, and she may do this to pay for the war. She then had to flee the city, and I personally think that this will be caused by Torrhen Manderly. Aemond Hightower looks to be scheming in the trailer as well, and I basically think they're going to turn the public against the Queen. Harrenhal will also apparently be going to the person who slays Aemond. We mentioned that Alice River could kill him and take the castle for herself, and yeah, as we know, Aemond does die above the God's Eye. He perishes along with Daemon, and I wonder if she's engineering this so 1, Aemond dies and she keeps the castle, and 2, the baby in her belly from Aemond then strengthens her claim. Perhaps. Now, this might also be a reach, but Helaena said she didn't want to be in that room anymore. Part of me wonders if this is where she'll jump from, and that she's seen her future and is actively trying to avoid it. Helaena takes her own life when it all gets too much and basically does a Tommen. Lastly, we have Corlys and his turning against Rhaenyra. In the book, after Ulf and Hugh swap sides, she tried to imprison the dragon seeds. Naturally, this caused Corlys to be furious and he went to warn Adam. This then led to him to being locked up and beaten, and I do think that's something that's going to happen in the character. In the show, Rhaenyra is refusing to allow the 2 bastards to be legitimized, despite doing it in the text. So I do think this is going to have a big fallout. They've changed it for a reason, and I expect that he'll be put in prison after his outburst, or he might try and warn his kids when the bastards get turned on. But yeah, that's how I think things are going to go down. Thank you as always for sitting to the end of the video. Really appreciate it. And please drop a comment and a like if you haven't already, and leave all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us as well and keep up to date with what we're doing, as always, you can get in touch with me at Heavy Spoilers on Instagram. We post in loads of pictures as well, and if you want to go that extra mile to support us, then you can click the join button, and for just 99 cents a month, you get at least 1 breakdown a week before anyone else. At the moment, we have the X-Files Season 4 breakdown up online, I think, and we also have a big breakdown of Interstellar. I think it's 1 hour and 40 minutes long. We went so in depth on the movie, and yeah, for just 99 cents a month, less than $12 a year, every single week you get a video just like that. And Backrooms is coming soon as well, so keep an eye out for that one too. Anyway, if not, huge thank you for sitting through this video. I've been your host, Paul, as always. Guess what, mate? You've been the bloody best, especially listening to this bit. That's why I reward you by calling you the best. You've listened this long, you get called the best by me. So thank you for all of your attention, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Peace.